Bonjour, John Cleveland host Anishinaabe, Bekejwanang Nindunjaba, Detroit Jiba. Hello, I'm John Cleveland host. Good morning. My deeper ancestry is from Bekejwanang, which is Walpole Island on the border of Canada and United States, one of the very, very few places that's actually always been under Native control. And I'm very glad to be here. So I'm going to move right ahead here. Yes, there we go. Does that show up there? Okay, we don't have any slides. Okay, we don't have any slides. I'm sorry. Maybe we can make these available later for everyone, but I'll move ahead anyway. So my talk is to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and also to review and look over the Four Hills of Life, a very wonderful Anishinaabe teaching. It's available in this book, Four Hills of Life by Thomas Peacock, highly recommended. And for that, I think I'll just go back and start at, a really long time ago. If we go back maybe 14,000 years, then this area here was covered under 2 miles of ice above us, with the Ice Age glaciers covering this area. Now, the evidence is clear now that Native Americans had made it to the Americas well before that. But of course, here in Michigan, we're still under ice, so Native Americans didn't actually get to this area until the glaciers started to retreat. That time from the glaciers until Columbus is often treated as, nothing's going on. But a lot was going on. Whole cultures developed and moved from completely hunter-gatherer to more agriculture. There was a lot of development can happen when you're talking about 10,000 years. So as that happened, the civilizations were advancing, and in 1492, of course, Columbus came. Now, I wanted to point out that Columbus was a slave trafficker. It's very clear in his letter that this was going on commonly. He writes, 100 Castellanos are easily obtained for a woman as to a farm, and there's plenty of dealers out there looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are especially in demand right now, but a good merchant should have girls of every age. And if anyone is in doubt about whether or not he was personally involved with this, giving girls as sex slaves was quite common back then for people in power. And we have a letter from someone who received one from Columbus. And I won't read it here. It's too graphic for us this morning. But it's Michael D. Cuno. And I encourage anyone who has any doubts to go ahead and take a look at it. It's available online, and there's a lot of other evidence other than that. An important thing to remember here is that this was the start of the Atlantic slave trade, because Columbus first enslaved Native Americans, and those were shipped around. And then as that stock was depleted, then they went to Africa to get African slaves and repopulate the slave populations on the plantations. So, the land that we are on, I wanted to hold a land acknowledgement here. UU Fellowship of Midland occupies the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. This land was ceded under coercive and deceptive circumstances in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. I've got a picture here of that. If these slides become available, we'll be able to show them. But colonization was a process, as we know, where Europeans took over control of the land. And a picture here is of the American Progress painting. Some of you may be familiar with it. It explicitly depicts Native Americans as being bad things being driven off the land. And that's coupled with the concept of manifest destiny, where there was a prevalent idea back then that Christians were specifically destined by their God to take over North America. And of course, that led to the boarding schools, where there was forced child labor, child deaths, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and the worst and a very bad part of all that was the removal of the culture. The kids were prohibited from speaking their language or exhibiting any kind of native spirituality, and were beaten if they were caught. So, so in that process, they were of course forced to convert to Christianity, and that was a very dark time for the Anishinaabe. Now we are starting to reclaim cultural aspects that we can teach. An important thing about the culture in Native American and especially Anishinaabe spirituality is the concept of the circle. If we look at the earth, we're on a spherical earth, and as that spherical earth rotates, the sun moves in a circle. We see it look like it rises to the east and then moves across to the south and then sets in the west, comes back across to rise in the east again. That idea of a circle is also reflected in the seasons, where the seasons have a springtime, which we associate with the east, summer to the south, fall to the west, and winter to the north. This shows up in what we call the medicine wheel. It would be really good to show this now. We don't have the slides working. But the medicine wheel has the colors of white, yellow, red, and black associated with those directions. And we see this in stone monuments out west, like the Bighorn medicine wheel, or around here, we don't have a lot of stones. So did they make sacred spaces like this? Of course they did. They did it with what they had. So in places like the Great Mound just south of here, or other places like that, we see these same circular sacred spaces made. And this same thing is something that's obvious to people living in connection with the earth in a place without a lot of artificial lights and buildings and things like that. And so we see the same thing if we look at very old cultures, even in Europe or in Africa or in Japan. We see the same circular idea that has the seasons and the directions mapped onto it. And you can map a lot onto that. One of the things that I want to talk about today is mapping the human lifespan onto it. If we do that, then we would put the Anishinaabe approach is to put infancy in the east, and there's a hill there, and then childhood in the south, and then adulthood in the west, and old age in the north. Each of those is associated with responsibilities, things you need to do as you climb that hill in your life. And a really nice watercolor drawing by a Native American artist depicts those four hills, and if we make the slides available at some point, you'll be able to see that. Those responsibilities, we heard some of them from Scott already, for infancy and childhood. For an adult, those responsibilities include to work, to get things done, to get your community healthy, to take care of people who need help. And as you get into old age, those responsibilities move on to being a teacher, to passing along the wisdom that you've accumulated over the many years that you've been able to be alive. So a lot of these concepts, both in a circle and otherwise, are important to understand the worldview. One of the important aspects of the Anishinaabe worldview is that we are all related. Now, I don't have the data. It would be wonderful to find out, but everyone in this room is a cousin to me by some amount. There's probably, I'm sure there's someone here who's closer than a sixth or seventh cousin. It's almost inevitable. Some people might be further, like a 12th or 13th or 20th cousin or something like that. But as humans, we're all related. And that same family tree we've discovered now with evolution to see that that same family tree extends to all life on Earth, that I'm the 25th millionth cousin to this willow tree out here. And that engenders the respect for all living things on Earth. It's a sacred Anishinaabe concept that is something where we can look at the science and say, oh, now we see this in the science too. An important thing in Anishinaabe culture is to learn from the world. We learn from nature. That's literally what science is. And we saw that reflected in the reading, where we went over some of the things that we learned from science and how they fit in this Anishinaabe approach of the four hills of life. Now, moving on, those are some of the concepts that were taught. And it's important when we approach Native stuff to be aware of the danger of cultural appropriation. I've got some horrible images of sports mascots and people in costumes to show we don't see those. Maybe that's a good thing. So the appropriation, some appropriation red flags everyone should be aware of is the use of stereotypes, is people who don't understand the context or the meaning of what they're showing. If something just looks pretty, but they don't even know what tribe or region it's from, or what it meant in Native culture, those are some red flags. Now, it's important in that context to look at another aspect of our celebration of Native concepts, our learning of Native concepts. And that's the idea and the recognition that these Native concepts have been under attack to be exterminated for many, many decades now. If you are going to exterminate a culture, obviously the boarding schools are a great first step. But another first step would be to make sure that nobody learns this stuff, to make sure that nobody does this stuff, to make sure that nobody celebrates Native concepts and Native spirituality. And one way that that can be done is by calling any use of any Native anything, any discussion like this, appropriation. That can shut things down too, and we have to be aware of that. Another approach would be to say that to do Native stuff, you have to be 100% Native. Nobody's 100% Native. I mean, I'm sure there might be somebody, but oh my gosh, right? That cuts out almost everybody on the reservations too. Or to say you can only learn Native concepts from somebody who's 100% Native. Well, that works just the way I just talked about. If we look at how biology works, we know that we have 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents, and then you go 32, 64, 128, and pretty soon you're talking about thousands of people. And because of that, very, very few people are pure anything. That also means that most people in this room aren't pure white, and that a lot of people have Native ancestry, even if it's a little bit, and don't know it. A good example of this is African Americans. Almost all African Americans have a significant chunk of Native ancestry. And the reason for that is obvious and unavoidable. We just talked about it. Columbus enslaved the Native Americans first. The plantations were staffed with Native American slaves, and then they slowly brought African American slaves in until you had mostly African slaves. And of course, during that time, the descendants of that mix are our current African Americans. And so we have to remember that, and we have to give ourselves some permission to learn and celebrate Native things when we do so with respect. The other recognition here is that Native Americans are not monolithic. We can find Natives who are of every political party and so on like that. So it's very important for us to be allies, especially to be allies when we talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, when we talk about children lost to the boarding schools. when we talk about things that help people today, a lot of those ways to be an ally are to vote with Native interest in mind. And that's surprisingly easy, because a lot of the same programs that help Natives are the same ones that help a lot of people who are disadvantaged. When we care about everybody and care about diversity, we help Native interests. Another one is to be aware of Native presence in your community. A lot of organizations are on Facebook and web pages and things like that. And to teach a lot of the concepts that we just talked about how we're all connected, about a recognition of the cycles of the seasons and the sun and the four directions. Another one, a big one, is to spend time teaching kids. That's what counts. Teaching them by example, teaching them by enjoying the outdoors, teaching them by showing the connections, and teaching them by taking them to Native events and places where they can learn a lot of this stuff. We are so fortunate here in Midland to have the Zebra Wing Center right down the road. That is literally the biggest Native American Learning Cultural Center and Museum this side of the Mississippi, and it's right there. It would be great to, take the kids for, from RE there, every other year or something like that. It's a great experience for the center. Another great opportunity is every June 6th, we celebrate the closing of the boarding school there in Mount Pleasant. You can put it on your calendar for every year for the next 10 years. It's June 6th every year. It's right there on Crawford Street. All you have to do is show up. It's open to everyone, and it's a wonderful experience, a moving experience, and also wonderful to see the culture coming back. Jennifer Granholm sold the tribe, that property for $1. And so one of the buildings is being converted to a cultural center where we can learn the language, learn the culture in the same place where the kids' culture was robbed from them and they were forced to worship in a chapel. So with that, that brings us to today or to tomorrow. I got this. How many people, all right, maybe people have seen it. I was going to put up the picture with the Columbus statue kissing the cement. How many people saw the picture with it? Yeah, with Columbus. Please look it up. It's wonderful. In 2021, in 2022, in 2023, the sitting president of the United States acknowledged both Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day and recognized the importance of that. In 2025, the President of the United States went on a tirade about how we have to honor our heroes and celebrate only Columbus Day. So I won't get into too much more detail about that, but I will mention another opportunity. Just for a few months, the Detroit Institute of Art, down by where I am, has a really nice Anishinaabe dedicated display, art exhibit, really worth going down and seeing. It's only through the spring. And a lot of times you'll see Native American sections in museums have like all kinds of different cultures all over the place, right? No, this is just Anishinaabe. Highly recommended. And of course, I mentioned the Zebra Wing Center. One more thing about the Zebra Wing Center is that to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, tomorrow they have a free screening of Indigenous movies from 6 to 8. You can just show up. It's right down the road. And just show up in the main Zebra Wing Center there, 6 to 8, free screening. It can also inform your life. You can join in celebrating and helping to preserve Anishinaabe culture in a lot of ways that I already talked about, with helping teaching kids and taking recognition of our world. You can also stay politically active, learn some Anishinaabe words. I had a slide, hopefully we'll make it available later for people to read. Some very simple language. Bonjour is hello. Miigwech is thank you, just those two. will get you a good ways. And I personally have found learning animal names helps me a lot. And when I learn the animal names in Anishinaabe and I go out on the lake and I see a muskrat, I can say, Boju, and if it's a muskrat or if it's a deer, like we heard earlier, Wawashkashi, for the deer, and that is a lot of fun. So with that, I wanted to, one other one, a neat one to see. We see the constellation Orion. That is Kabibanaka, the winter bringer. You see that constellation, you know that that's the personification of winter. And if you notice, it only appears as winter's coming, and it disappears in the spring because it goes behind the sun. So whether you say Boju, Kabibanaka, or with the muskrat, Boju Washeshk, a lot of times that can remind us of our connection to every living thing, literally connection as family. So with that, I wanted to say, miigwech.